Hello and welcome to Firstpost. You're watching Vantage with me, Alison LaGrange. Donald Trump is escalating his attacks on Ukraine. He is now calling their President Zelensky a dictator. After 3 years of endless support from Joe Biden, how is Zelensky dealing with these insults? What is he doing to sway Donald Trump? Meanwhile, Europe is scrambling for a seat at the table. Macron and Sharma are heading to Washington to meet Trump. Some others are boosting defense spending. But is it too little, too late? Also, Donald Trump has hinted at foreign meddling in India's elections. What did 1 month of Trump presidency look like? Why is Elon Musk suddenly so interested in Fort Knox? The Indian Army chief says he is concerned by the Pakistan spy team's visit to Bangladesh. Germany is heading to polls. Who will be the next chancellor? Pakistan wants its citizens to name its lunar rover. And archaeologists have unearthed the ancient tomb of a pharaoh in Egypt. All this and more coming up. But first, the headlines. Top diplomats from the group of 20 major economies are meeting in South Africa. Indian, Chinese and Russian foreign ministers are in attendance. But the group's richest member, the US, is skipping the two-day meet. South Africa is the first African country to lead the forum. In India, Rekha Gupta is sworn in as the Chief Minister of Delhi. She is a first-time member of the Legislative Assembly. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, along with top BJP leaders, attended her swearing-in ceremony. Rekha Gupta is the fourth woman Chief Minister of Delhi. Hamas hands over the bodies of 4 Israeli hostages taken into Gaza during the October 2023 attack. This is the first release of dead hostages under a fragile ceasefire. On Saturday, Hamas will release 6 living Israeli captives. The criminal trial of ousted South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol begins in Seoul. Yoon is the country's first sitting head of state to stand trial in a criminal case. He has been charged with insurrection for imposing martial law last December. If convicted, Yoon could be sentenced to life in prison or even be given the death penalty. And Nigeria bans large fuel trucks from its roads after a series of deadly tanker explosions. These accidents have killed hundreds in recent months. The ban will come into effect from March. Road accidents involving fuel trucks are common in the West African country.
A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left.
Last month, we were wondering if Donald Trump would support Ukraine against Russia, whether he would keep the weapons flowing. A month later, and we are asking a different question. Will Trump ever stop attacking Zelensky? That's how much things have deteriorated. Yesterday, the US president launched another attack on him. Let me quote what he said. A modestly successful comedian, Volodymyr Zelensky, talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that couldn't be won. A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he is not going to have a country left. This message will likely haunt Zelensky. Under Joe Biden, he was a star, a symbol of Western opposition to Russia. But Trump is calling him a dictator. He is mocking him as a modestly successful comedian. Later in the day, Trump also addressed a conference in Florida. There, he repeated his attacks. Listen in.
I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered, and millions of people have unnecessarily died. And you can't bring a war to an end if you don't talk to both sides. You got to talk. They haven't been talking for 3 years. So we hope to see a ceasefire soon and to reestablish stability in Europe and the Middle East.
Trump says Zelensky has done a terrible job. These remarks are coming in the middle of a momentous period in the war. Last week, President Trump spoke to Vladimir Putin. This Tuesday, U.S. envoys met Russian officials in Riyadh. They agreed to work toward ending the war, and that too without Kiev at the table. All of this has raised concern in Ukraine and Europe. They fear Trump and Putin will cut a deal by themselves, basically exclude Kiev and Europe from the talks. In that context, Trump's comments will worry Zelensky even more, because Trump isn't just talking about politics. He seems to personally dislike Zelensky. How is the Ukrainian leader responding to that? Well, he can't hit back at Trump. After all, the U.S. is Ukraine's biggest military donor. So Zelensky is being diplomatic. He says American pragmatism will come through, that the choice is between Putin and peace.
I rely on Ukrainian unity, on our Ukrainian courage, on our relations with partners, on our European solidarity, and on America's pragmatism, because America needs success just as much as we do. Success brings us together. Our unity is the strongest safeguard of our future, a future not with Putin, but with peace. And this is a choice for the whole world, especially for the strongest nations, to stand with Putin or with peace. The right choice is peace.
Zelensky isn't opposed to talks per se, but he seems to have two problems. One, that Ukraine isn't at the table, and two, that Russia is being given the upper hand. Zelensky's advisor made that clear. He feels the U.S. is letting Russia dictate terms.
To me, the concept of peace through strength, which the American administration promotes, sounds strange when today, in Riyadh, they are demonstrating peace through weakness. This contradiction is quite odd, and therefore, peace through weakness in relation to Russia, for Europe and the United States, is impossible.
So what is Zelensky's plan? He's making a last-ditch effort to sway Trump. A U.S. special envoy is visiting Kiev. His name is Keith Kellogg. Unlike other Trump advisors, he is more conventional. Kellogg has already met Zelensky's advisors. He met the president just a short while back. Zelensky's plan is to take the U.S. envoy to the front lines to show him how Kiev is fighting hard. The battlefield scenes may sway Kellogg, but Trump seems set on his path. Over in Russia, Putin will be enjoying all this. Not only is the war coming to an end, it is ending on his terms. Yesterday, Putin was all praise for Trump.
To be honest, I am surprised at the restraint of the newly elected President of the United States, Trump, in dealing with his allies who have behaved in such a, frankly, caddish manner. He's still being quite modest in their relations. They're not shutting themselves off. Do they want to sit here at the negotiating table and mediate between Russia and the United States? Well, probably not. So why the hysteria here? Hysteria is inappropriate.
On the battlefield, Putin is making gains. Yesterday, Russian drones attacked the city of Odessa. They targeted the region's power grid. Almost 90,000 people were left without electricity. The city of Kherson was also bombed yesterday, and today air raid sirens were heard in Kiev. The capital skies lit up with explosions. Take a look. Russia is also making moves in Kursk. This is a western province in Russia, but last year Ukraine captured a part of it. Zelensky was hoping to use this land as a bargaining chip, but Russian soldiers are retaking it. Putin says Ukraine's defensive lines in Kursk have been breached, though Kiev is calling it disinformation. Either way, one thing is clear. Putin has the momentum and the upper hand, both on the battlefield and at the negotiating table. As for Zelensky, he's in the endgame. The Ukrainian president used his personal charm to sway Western capitals to keep the weapons flowing. But Trump isn't buying it. This is the same Zelensky who the US media once compared to Winston Churchill. Now he stands humiliated by their president. That brings us to Europe. Like Ukraine, Trump left out the Europeans as well. European leaders are trying to reclaim their place now. They could be making some progress. Next week, Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer will travel to Washington, D.C. They are the leaders of France and the UK. So Europe finally has an opening with the US. It has been a difficult week for the bloc. President Macron has hosted 2 emergency meetings in 3 days. The first one happened on Monday. A dozen European leaders participated in the talks, along with the chiefs of NATO and the European Union. Yesterday, Macron gathered a wider group of European nations. Leaders from 18 countries attended. Macron issued a statement afterwards. He said France and its allies are on the same page. They want Ukraine and Europe to be included in any peace talks. Europe has a chance to make its voice heard. The U.S. National Security Advisor has spoken. His name is Mike Waltz. Now, Waltz says that European leaders will have a say in the process. So what could be Europe's ask? Which issues will they push forward? Let's look at Macron's statement from yesterday again. It offers some clues. Let me read out a section for you. Peace must be lasting and accompanied by robust and credible guarantees. The security concerns of Europeans must be taken into account. Macron highlights 3 key issues. First, he wants lasting peace. Any deal with Russia must guarantee a complete end to the war. Second, he calls for credible security guarantees. That's a nod to Zelensky's demands. The Ukrainian president wants security guarantees from the West. This is to deter Russia from striking again. Macron appears to support that. The third issue is about the larger security of Europe and America's role in it. For decades, the US has been Europe's key defense partner. The American nuclear umbrella has shielded the continent. NATO has been its primary shield against Russia. Now Trump's Russia outreach threatens to upend this alliance. Macron has been pushing Europe to take its own path and strengthen its defenses. More European leaders are beginning to support the idea.
Unfortunately, recent developments and this different view of things from the United States now oblige us not only to face the truth, but to move at a very high speed and implement decisions that we have been discussing for a long time, whether we are talking about the establishment of a defense policy that will allow Europe to project deterrent power itself, without being permanently completely dependent on the United States, a crucial issue for our country.
The Greek Prime Minister was referring to Europe's defense spending. He wants the bloc to raise its investment in defense dramatically. That idea is gaining traction. But Macron wants to go a step further. He wants Europe to step up and provide security guarantees to Ukraine. This could even mean sending European troops to Ukraine. On this front, Europe is sharply divided. France, the UK, support the idea of troop deployments, but many European nations oppose it. This includes Spain, Germany, even Denmark. Their leaders say it is premature to discuss troop deployments. Italy's Giorgia Meloni seems to have dismissed the idea entirely. She called it the most complex and least effective option. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has no objections. He says if Europe decides to send troops to Ukraine, he wouldn't stand in the way.
Well, if we have a peace deal, I think having troops over there from the standpoint of Europe, we won't have to put any over there because, we're very far away. But having troops over there would be fine. I would not object to it at all.
Trump may raise this again when he meets Macron and Starmer next week. How will they respond? Can they show a united front? Or will Europe's internal divisions be exposed once again? The clock is ticking for Europe to find common ground. So Europe has a lot on its plate. Its leaders are in a huddle. Some are heading to Washington, but some have adopted a different strategy. You see, for years, Europe depended on the US as its security guarantor. Those guarantees seem to be gone. So European nations are boosting their defense spending. Like Denmark, it has allocated $7 billion to buy more weapons in the next 2 years. The Danish Prime Minister also has a slogan for it. She wants her military to buy, buy, buy. So Europe wants to be self-sufficient. But is it too little too late?
Buy, buy, buy. That's Denmark's new mantra. And what's on the shopping list? It's military weapons. Denmark is ramping up its defense budget, allocating an extra 50 billion kroner for the next 2 years. That's around $7 billion. Last year, defense spending made up 2.4% of Denmark's GDP. Now, the Danish PM wants to push it to 3%.
We are allocating 50 billion kroner over the next 2 years with a message for the Chief of Defense. Buy what can contribute here and now to a stronger defense and thus to stronger deterrence.
Denmark has spent decades cutting its defense spending. But last year, that changed. It allocated over $26 billion for defense spending over a 10-year span. But now, Denmark has decided that isn't enough, it needs more, and it needs it quickly. This is a bold move, but why the need now? Denmark has been under a lot of pressure. First, there was the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The war is at Europe's doorsteps. It has spooked European nations. Then came Donald Trump's plan to take control of Greenland. It is a part of the Kingdom of Denmark. There are also fears of US cutting security support to Europe. So all of this has left Denmark on edge. It wants to boost its own defense to the highest level in over half a century.
We are facing an aggressive Russia that is rearming, and which may be getting ready to attack other countries. And we are in the most dangerous situation for many, many years. Therefore, because of the threat from Russia, in order to defend Denmark and avoid war, we are now embarking on further rearmament.
And it's not just Denmark. Finland is also stepping up its defense spending. In 2025, it plans to allocate $6.8 billion to defense. By 2032, that figure could rise to $11.5 billion. If it does, Finland will be spending 3.3% of its GDP on defense, far exceeding NATO's 2% target. In November last year, Finland also hosted a large-scale NATO artillery exercise. This was its first time doing so since joining the military alliance in 2023. Finland, joined by troops from several NATO nations, took part in military drills in the Arctic forests of Lapland.
The aim is to show that we are ready to react to any situation, that we are training to react to any crisis situation in the face of our strategic competitors, whoever they may be.
And this is just the beginning. With Russia's aggression looming and uncertainty in transatlantic ties, Europe is rethinking its defense strategy. Support from the US can no longer be taken for granted under the Trump administration.
As President Trump has made abundantly clear, he believes that our European friends must play a bigger role in the future of this continent. We don't think, you hear this term, burden sharing, but we think it's an important part of being in a shared alliance together that the Europeans step up while America focuses on areas of the world that are in great danger.
So, the idea is to become less dependent for security on the United States and prop up its own defense forces. Denmark and Finland are just two examples. But across the continent, military budgets are rising and alliances are being reinforced. The message is clear: Europe is arming itself for a new era of uncertainty. The question is, will it be enough?
India has featured heavily in Trump's first month as president, whether it's hosting Prime Minister Narendra Modi or threatening tariffs or cutting dubious funding. Yesterday was more of that. Trump was addressing a conference in Florida. There, he once again talked about U.S. aid funding to India. Around $21 million had been set aside for India, apparently to boost voter turnout. But Trump hinted at something more sinister. He suggested the Biden administration was trying to meddle in India's elections to try and get someone else elected. Listen to this.
And $21 million for voter turnout in India. What do we need to spend $21 million for voter turnout in India? Wow, $21 million. I guess they were trying to get somebody else elected. Wow, we ought to tell the Indian government, because when we hear that Russia spent about $2 in our country, it was a big deal, right? They took some internet ads for $2,000. This is a total breakthrough. $21 million for India elections.
Trump is calling it a breakthrough. He says he may tell the Indian government about it. But what exactly is the funding row? It began with a post by Elon Musk's Doge agency. Doge stands for the Department of Government Efficiency. Trump has asked it to cut wasteful public spending. As a part of that, Doge is targeting U.S. aid. It has cut funding programs to several nations. Last week, it cut $21 million to India, money that was allegedly meant for increasing voter turnout. Now Trump has given it a different twist. He is suggesting election interference. He hasn't given any proof to back this claim, nor is it clear who got this $21 million in India. But it does track with what Prime Minister Modi said last year. In a campaign interview, Modi accused powerful outsiders of meddling in India. Let me quote what he said. "I can see there is an attempt by some in the world to influence our elections. They are not just giving their opinions, but are trying to influence our polls. But they will not be successful." Now, Trump is hinting at the same. In India, this has triggered a political storm. Parties are accusing each other of enabling foreign interference. So what's needed is a probe, an investigation to find out who got the U.S. funds, how it was spent, and what impact it had, because foreign meddling in elections is a serious issue. As for Trump, he isn't doing this out of love for India. It's political mileage for him. A, he can pin foreign meddling charges on Biden, and B, he can claim to cut wasteful spending. So don't mistake Trump's intentions, because just days ago he was railing against India. Over what? His age-old grievance, tariffs. Trump had given a joint interview with Elon Musk. Both men were discussing Tesla's entry into India. We have been hearing about this for a long time, but tariffs remained a barrier. Musk wanted to import his cars to sell in India, but tariffs on luxury EVs was at 110%. So New Delhi asked him to manufacture or assemble in India, and Trump took offense to that. Let me quote what he said. "It's impossible for him to sell a car in India. Now, if he built the factory in India, that's okay. But that's unfair to us. It's very unfair." So Trump says a Tesla factory in India would be unfair. He wants Musk to make in America instead. And these comments come at a crucial time. Tesla has just posted job listings in India. Reports say that they are opening showrooms in New Delhi and Mumbai. But it's not clear how they will operate. Will they import cars to sell, or will they make vehicles at local plants? A lot of people were already asking this question, but Trump's remarks have just made it more complicated, and also a bit unfair, because India has shown willingness to engage with Trump. The government has slashed tariffs to appease him. Earlier, imported luxury EVs were taxed at 110%. Now they are taxed at 70%. Despite this concession, Trump doesn't seem happy. He is stirring the pot to keep India on its toes, both politically and financially. Donald Trump has been in office for a month now. It certainly doesn't feel that way. Since his return, Trump has pushed through a flood of executive orders, decisions, and policy shifts. The speed of his actions has been dizzying, sometimes even difficult to keep a track of. But how are his decisions playing out on the ground? Do Trump supporters approve of his first policy moves? How are Americans reacting to his second term? The first polls are in, and Trump's approval rating has slipped.
It has been a busy month for Donald Trump.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
He's turned decision-making into a reality TV spectacle.
The golden age of America begins right now.
One that is often broadcasted straight out of the Oval Office in the White House. It has become a familiar sight. Trump sitting in his office, surrounded by a large stack of executive orders. As the cameras roll, Trump's staff secretary, Will Schaaf, sets the stage.
That's a big one.
He places one folder after another before the president while narrating what's about to unfold.
The first item that President Trump is signing is the rescission of 78 Biden-era executive actions, executive orders, presidential memoranda, and others. The next item here is the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Treaty. This next item is a directive to the federal government ordering the restoration of freedom of speech. We have a list of pardons and commutations relating to events that occurred on January 6, 2021.
And then, with the dramatic stroke of his Sharpie, Trump signs the order into law.
Could you imagine Biden doing this? I don't think so.
This is not just politics, it's a performance played out for the cameras. And that's what excites Trump's supporters the most. Trump's first month in office has upended Washington and strained America's relationship with its allies. But how do Americans feel about his decisions? The reaction is mixed. Trump's approval ratings have fallen. 51% of Americans don't approve of his leadership. A month ago, that number was just 41%. Some of Trump's key policies still have support, like immigration. His tough stance on immigration has 47% approval. On foreign affairs, 44% of Americans approve of Trump's approach. But domestic issues are hurting him. Inflation and rising prices remain Trump's biggest challenge.
You notice some of the prices going up, food prices going up. He did make those promises that food prices would go down before he entered office.
So yeah, I just think that having tariffs, it's not good for trade, and he's not promoting the economy in any regard for the working class. Or anybody aside from the upper 1%. So
many Americans who elected him really wanted him to do something about the high prices that they experienced at the store, and his agenda so far has been focused on other things.
It's still early days for the Trump administration. He has 4 more years in office. So there's plenty of time for a comeback or course correction.
If the gold isn't there, we're going to be very upset.
Our next story is wrapped in mystery, a $425 billion mystery. It begins at Fort Knox, a high-security U.S. Army installation in Kentucky. But the real intrigue lies next door. The United States Bullion Depository It is one of the most secure vaults on the planet. Inside it is over half of America's gold reserves, a staggering 147 million troy ounces of gold. Now, a troy ounce is a unit of measurement for gold. It is a little heavier than a standard ounce. So Fort Knox holds around 147 million troy ounces. That's 59% of the U.S. Treasury's total reserves, all locked away, unseen for decades. But the new Trump administration has a question. Is all that gold still there?
Going to Fort Knox to make sure the gold is there.
Are they going to?
You know that we're going to go into Fort Knox. Do you know about that?
Sir,
How was that bad bump?
Are they going to eliminate more national security positions, civilians there?
We'll see what happens. But one of the things we do want to look, I mean, we hope everything's fine with Fort Knox, but we're going to go to Fort Knox, the fabled Fort Knox, to make sure the gold is there.
Where would this President Biden brought up?
If the gold isn't there, we're going to be very upset.
Fort Knox holds over half of America's gold. Trump isn't sure it's still there. So he is sending his best buddy, Elon Musk. He wants Musk to investigate if the gold is still at Fort Knox. And what does Musk say? Well, this is an issue close to his heart. He's posted multiple times on X about Fort Knox. He's even asked for an audit, asking U.S. officials to check how much gold is there. But the question is, where would it go? Why does the U.S. keep its gold at Fort Knox? What are the conspiracy theories surrounding it? And why is Trump suddenly interested? Let's look at it one by one. For nearly a century, Fort Knox has been synonymous with impenetrability. It was constructed in 1936 by the U.S. Treasury. America needed a secure location for its gold reserves, and this was the perfect location. The facility sits on the rolling hills of Kentucky. It is surrounded by barbed wire, armed guards, and is protected by the U.S. Mint Police. The idea of hoarding gold wasn't just about security. It was about faith. In the early 20th century, gold was the bedrock of American financial credibility. During the Great Depression, Franklin D. Roosevelt outlawed private ownership of gold. He put all gold reserves in federal hands. Fort Knox became the heart of this operation, a gleaming repository of national wealth. Over the years, Fort Knox's secrecy has given rise to many conspiracy theories. Some say the vaults are empty. Some say the gold was siphoned away, that it was used to prop a failing economy or to fund shadowy government projects. Some even suggest the gold bars were removed and replaced with gold-painted tungsten bars. So there have been all sorts of theories, which brings us to inspections. In reality, Fort Knox is rarely audited. The last major comprehensive audit was in 1953. That is over 70 years ago. In 1974, a group of congressmen and journalists were invited to Fort Knox. It was to witness the gleaming stacks of gold bars. The event was meant to silence skeptics, but it did not work. The conspiracy theories still persisted. The last tour of Fort Knox was in 2017. That's during the last Trump administration. So why does Fort Knox remain such a mystery? There's another reason: transparency, or lack thereof. Global gold reserves undergo regular audits, but Fort Knox remains shrouded in secrecy. Some say it is standard security measures. Others see it as a smokescreen, a cover for something deeper. And now Elon Musk, backed by Trump, wants to pull back the curtain. If it's there, the Treasury's position remains strong. If it's not, well, it opens up an entirely different conversation. So will Trump and Musk get their wish? Will there be an unprecedented audit of Fort Knox? And if so, what will it reveal? Maybe nothing, but maybe everything. But until then, the legend of Fort Knox remains just that, a legend, a mystery worth $425 billion waiting to be solved. Let's turn to Bangladesh now, which is facing a major debt crisis. A new report has shed light on the country's loans and interest payments. And the big takeaway? It's way too high. Bangladesh's foreign debt stands at $78 billion. Now, this figure often varies. Another report in September claimed 100 billion. But either way, it's pretty high. 78 billion is around 17% of their GDP. This rising debt also means bigger interest payments. You must put aside more money to service your debt. In 2023, Dakar paid $4.7 billion to lenders, and this is taking money away from other sectors. Just look at the spending last year. Almost 17% of national revenue was set aside for debt repayment. Only 3% was allocated to health, and only 11% to education. This is not ideal for any country. It shows debt is taking up a huge chunk of Bangladesh's budget. So what's the solution? Ideally, you need to kickstart your economy. You need to expand economic activity. But Bangladesh faces several hurdles. In November last year, the World Bank cut its forecast for Dakar, that too by almost 1.7%. Ratings agency Moody's also downgraded the country from stable to negative. Even government officials are worried. In December, the planning advisor said a recession was likely. He blamed it on low private spending. To make things worse, the political situation has not stabilized. Street violence is still being reported. On Tuesday, students clashed at a university in Khulna. Around 150 of them were injured. Such chaos is bad for the economy. It keeps foreign investors away. Plus, Dakar is in the middle of a painful pivot. It is moving away from India to other partners like China and Pakistan. Take the example of medical tourism. Historically, patients from Bangladesh have visited Kolkata for treatment. The city used to receive 10,000 patients per month. But now Dakar is looking at China. Talks are underway with the government in Beijing, and reports say the first batch of patients could travel by March. And this is clearly a political decision, because India is a lot closer than China. Even culturally, it's a more suitable destination. Yet Dakar is asking China for help. And for defense, they are reaching out to Pakistan. Last month, Pakistani spies visited Bangladesh. They traveled to regions close to India's northeast, including the famous Chicken's Neck. This is a small slice of land that connects northeast India to the rest of the country. So it's strategically very important. And Pakistani spies visited a nearby location, the district of Rangpur, which is just 130 kilometers from the Chicken's Neck. India's army chief has reacted to this visit. He called the trip concerning.
I had used the word epicenter of terrorism for a particular country. Now that countrymen, if they go to any other place and they happen to be our neighbor, as far as I am concerned, I should be concerned about it. That they should not be able to use that soil to kind of send terrorists to India.
Dakar must get its priorities in order. The first priority is to bring peace to the streets, to restore law and order. Only then will investors take Bangladesh seriously. Second, it needs to work with its neighbors, not against them. India and Bangladesh share a 4,000-kilometer border. They are also major trading partners, so it benefits Dakar to cooperate with New Delhi. Instead, they're doing the opposite, hosting Pakistani spies, striking deals with China, and obsessing over Sheikh Hasina. Such misplaced priorities will hurt Bangladesh in the long run. Now let's turn our attention to Germany. This is Europe's biggest economy, and it's going to the polls on Sunday, the 23rd of February. This election is taking place against a backdrop of economic decline and a series of deadly attacks, which have increased pressure to reform immigration in the country. Now, 4 candidates are bidding to be Germany's next chancellor. Who are they? What do they stand for? And who is in the lead? Our next report tells you.
Germany is Europe's biggest economy, the most populous nation in the European Union, and a leading member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. And now, its citizens are going to polls on February 23rd to elect a new parliament. Elections usually take place every 4 years, and this one was due on September 28th this year. But it has been brought forward thanks to the collapse of the Olaf Scholz government. This election is taking place against a backdrop of 4 fatal car rammings and stabbings that have increased pressure to reform immigration and asylum rules. Berlin is also battling 2 years of economic decline, high energy prices, and stiff Chinese competition. So the onus is on the next government to turn things around. 4 candidates are vying to become Germany's next chancellor: the incumbent, the opposition leader, the current vice-chancellor, and in a first, a leader of a far-right party. Let's take a closer look at the top contenders. The frontrunner is the 69-year-old 6 feet and 6 inches tall flying enthusiast Friedrich Merz of the Christian Democratic Union, or CDU, which is part of the Conservative Alliance including CDU and the Christian Social Union in Bavaria, or the CSU. He is a pro-business social conservative who joined the youth arm of the party as a young man. He has worked his way up the ranks, spent years waiting in the wings, and now he's running with a hardline stance on migration, with permanent border controls and tightening the country's asylum law. Merz has also made promises to cut taxes and slash $52 billion in welfare spending. But he has promised to bolster aid for Ukraine. Germany is the second biggest weapons supplier to Ukraine after the United States. Then comes someone who could be the kingmaker. 46-year-old Alice Weidel is the first candidate of the Alternative for Germany, or AfD, since the party was created in 2013. She is a far-right anti-immigration leader who is an economist by training. She wants to end sanctions on Russia. She enjoys good ties with Moscow, so unsurprisingly wants to end aid for Ukraine. Weidel has become popular with young voters on TikTok and gained widespread support over her hardline promises of mass deportations. One such admirer is tech billionaire and Donald Trump's close advisor, Elon Musk. The next contender is the incumbent. 66-year-old Olaf Scholz from the Social Democratic Party of Germany, or the SPD, has been the chancellor since September 2021, leading an unpopular coalition which collapsed in November. Now, Scholz wants a second chance to boost the economy by bolstering investment and raising the minimum wage. He has backed faster deportation of failed asylum seekers, and while he supports Ukraine, he says it can't come at the cost of German citizens. But his vice-chancellor, who is also a contender, has a different opinion. Robert Habeck belongs to the Green Party. He believes permanent financing of war-torn Ukraine is important. So far, the right-wing opposition parties have remained steadily in the lead. As per opinion polls, CDU and CSU are leading with 29% of the votes, followed by AfD with 21%. SPD comes in third with 16% of the votes, followed by the Greens with 12%. In a few days, we will know which way Germany will swing: left, right, or remain centered.
And now on to Pakistan, which has launched a new nationwide contest. It is to name its first lunar rover. Citizens from across the nation can take part in this. Whoever wins will get 100,000 Pakistani rupees. That's around $350. The mission will take off in 2028. It plans to land on the moon's south pole. But here's the twist. The mission, in fact, is Chinese. Beijing's Chang'e 8 mission. So China is sending the rocket. And what is Pakistan's contribution? A rover weighing 35 kilograms. Our next report tells you how Pakistan is aiming for the moon, but with a lot of help from China.
The Space and Upper Atmosphere Research Commission, aka the SUPARCO. It is Pakistan's illustrious space agency, known for its historic inability to launch anything beyond press releases. But in its hallowed halls, a new idea has been born this year. Pakistan would land on the moon. Well, not exactly land in the way that Neil Armstrong once did, more like hitch a ride on China's lunar bus. and hope not to be left behind at the last stop. Pakistan has thrown its weight, all 35 kilograms of it, behind the Chang'e 8 mission. It's a Chinese lunar mission scheduled for 2028. An indigenous rover designed by Suparco will join the mission. Pakistan has even launched a contest to name their soon-to-be lunar hitchhiker, a move designed to spur national excitement. Citizens are invited to submit their best suggestions for the rover's name, because while Pakistan might lack space infrastructure, it wants to make sure it doesn't lack optimism. The winner of this naming contest will receive a grand prize, 100,000 Pakistani rupees, or roughly $350. Now, this may seem like a big moment for Pakistan's space ambitions, but scratch the surface and what you'll find is a glaring dependency on China. This mission is less of a national achievement and more like a cosmic group project. China is doing the heavy lifting here, and Islamabad, well, it wants to be mentioned in the credits. For context, let's rewind the clock a bit. Pakistan's space program was established in 1961, just 8 years after NASA. Back then, it had the potential to become a regional powerhouse. In fact, Pakistan was the first in South Asia to launch a rocket, beating India to the punch in 1962. But while India went on to build ISRO into a global leader, Pakistan's Suparco seemed content with grand plans, ambitious roadmaps that never quite materialized. India's Chandrayaan-3 landed on the moon's south pole, the first country to achieve this feat, and only a handful of countries to land on the moon. Meanwhile, Pakistan's contribution to lunar exploration is, well, a 35-kilogram robot, that too on a Chinese spaceship. The contrast could not be starker. One nation aims to make history, the other hopes not to be written out of it entirely. But to be fair, every journey starts with a single step, even if that step is taken with borrowed shoes. Pakistan's decision to join the Chang'e 8 mission is a start, a recognition that space exploration matters. It's also a move to save face in the region where space prowess is increasingly being seen as a measure of geopolitical clout. But the real question remains, can Pakistan translate this symbolic leap into an actual space program? Or will it continue to ride China's coattails? We don't know the answer yet, but for now, Pakistan is reaching for the stars, one outsourced contract at a time.
Let's shift our attention to Egypt, where archaeologists have made a fascinating discovery. They have unearthed the ancient tomb of a pharaoh, or a ruler of ancient Egypt. This is the first discovery of an Egyptian royal's tomb in more than a century, since Tutankhamun's tomb was famously uncovered in 1922. So who is the pharaoh of this newly discovered tomb? And what makes this tomb special? And why do pharaonic royal tombs continue to inspire global frenzy? Our next report tells you.
The year was 1922. Archaeologists discovered the tomb of the ancient Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun. He belonged to the 18th Egyptian dynasty and ruled from 1332 to 1323 BC. This discovery uncovered spectacular objects in the tomb, from gold-covered chariots to the famous solid gold-covered mask, and became one of the most memorable episodes, not just in the discovery of ancient Egyptian remains, but in the history of archaeology. And now, more than 100 years later, the world is witnessing another shining discovery. Albeit it doesn't come with hidden glitter or gold, it is a milestone nonetheless. Archaeologists have discovered the ancient tomb of King Thutmose II. This is the first tomb of a pharaoh since Tutankhamun's was uncovered over a century ago, and Thutmose's tomb is the last undiscovered royal tomb of the 18th Egyptian dynasty. It has been located near Luxor, west of the Valley of the Kings, which is one of the world's most important archaeological sites, because it is home to many ancient Egyptian royals. And this discovery is crucial for a number of reasons. Thutmose was an important leader. He lived nearly 3,500 years ago, and he's an ancestor of King Tut. Thutmose's wife was one of the few women who ruled Egypt in her own right. Queen Hatshepsut, who is regarded as one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs. Thutmose's mummified remains were uncovered 2 centuries ago, but his original burial site was never located until now. Because this tomb happens to be in a fascinating location, an area which has long been associated with the resting places of women. According to archaeologists, the tomb flooded soon after the king's burial, which damaged most of its contents. But some antiquities have been recovered, including funerary furniture, painted ceiling parts that are still intact, and a large staircase, along with a wealth of knowledge about a period of history that archaeologists know very little about. Thutmose's tomb will undeniably join the league of ancient Egypt's wonders that inspire media frenzy and booming tourism. Year after year, pyramids and ancient artifacts draw hordes of tourists to the country. Last year, 15.7 million tourists visited Egypt, curious to know more about the civilization of mummies that flourished for thousands of years. So, the once-in-a-century discovery of Thutmose's tomb adds to the magic of this ancient kingdom. And it is undeniably an extraordinary moment for Egypt and Egyptology, which continues to fascinate the world.
And now it's time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. South Korea and the United States conduct a joint aerial exercise in the Korean peninsula. People leave candles and flowers outside the Rome hospital where Pope Francis is hospitalized with pneumonia. And in a dramatic rescue, a police officer and a firefighter saves a woman trapped in a burning car. Finally, taking you back in history. On this day in 1913, Australia started building its new capital, Canberra. The city was chosen as the capital as a compromise between rivals Sydney and Melbourne. Canberra was a fully planned city. Its development was delayed by the 2 world wars and the Great Depression. Leaving you on that note, thank you for watching. We will see you tomorrow.
For some reason, I looked out of the corner of my eye, and there's this off-duty fireman, and he's got all his fire retardant gear on. And I'm like, what? You know, and there's no truck around. And so I go up, and I'm like, dude, go get her out. And so he got her out of the truck.
Anybody else in there?
So we got to get her out of that scene. And I picked her legs up, he grabbed her torso, we walked her to the median to get her away from the flyer.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Namaste, Mr. President.
Bharat Kelogan, Komeri Namaste.
How many people generally follow you in interviews?
Typically in a month, we have viewers up to 150 million. That's more than twice the population of France. And in the last 2 years, we had 3 billion viewers. So I say, Laurent, this is your chance to be famous. You're on Firstpost. One word to describe your equation with Prime Minister Modi.
Amitié.
As India and France work together, are you creating a new era of non-alignment in the technology space?
India is a training superpower. 1 million engineers a year, more than all of Europe and the US combined. So we have that partnership. We have a partnership on the environment and the economy. We also have civilian nuclear programs, and that is something we've developed far beyond the France-India relationship. So we want to work together on AI.
And then comes China with its DeepSeek, creating models at a fraction of the cost. Did that innovation take you by surprise? Did that breakthrough make you sit up and think, what did the Chinese do and how?
But what did DeepSeek do? They took everything that was already available from the last AI model, and then they recalibrated it.
So are you going to ban Chinese AI in France?
So we don't have this American approach of banning tech because of where it comes from.